My daughter-in-law sneaked something strange into my drink when she thought I wasn't watching. A special treat for my favorite mother-in-law, she said with a smirk. I smiled back and casually swapped glasses with her mother, the same woman who once called me worthless. 35 minutes later, sometimes the sweetest smiles hide the darkest secrets. Like when someone hands you a drink with a perfect, innocent grin and calls it a little treat. My daughter-in-law did just that, but something deep inside me screamed, "This isn't kindness. This was calculated." What happened next changed everything, shattering my family and exposing a truth so ugly it still chills me to the bone. She stood there, glass in hand, her smile too wide, too perfect. "A little treat for my favorite mother-in-law," she cooed, her tone syrupy sweet. Oh, that sweetness. It was a kind that coats words in charm, but leaves a bitter, metallic aftertaste. I looked at the drink, then at her, and something primal inside me, call it instinct, call it experience, call a mother's sixth sense, whispered that this wasn't genuine. This was a trap. She turned away quickly, as if she had nothing to hide, but her eyes flicked sideways. Just once, and in that tiny, almost imperceptible flicker, I saw it. A spark of expectation, a silent waiting. She was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. So I smiled back, and while they laughed and chatted around the dinner table, I did something no one saw, something I didn't even plan. I slowly, deliberately, reached across the table and switched the glasses. I placed hers in front of her own mother, the same woman who once called me useless at a family gathering, who looked down at me every chance she got. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I just watched and waited. And exactly 35 minutes later, everything changed. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Faces turned pale. One person clutched her chest. Another shouted for help. And through it all, I sat quietly, still holding the glass that was meant for me. The glass she poured. The one she smiled about. The one I never drank from. People often think betrayal comes crashing down, loud, with slamming doors, raised voices, angry tears. But sometimes it arrives in silence, in a smile, in a drink handed to you with a grin so perfect, you almost forget to question it. Almost. Before that night, before the drink, before the switch, before the 35 minutes that changed absolutely everything, there was just me, a woman who raised her only son with everything she had. I wasn't born into wealth. I didn't have fancy degrees. But I had grit, I had loyalty, and I had love. Honest, quiet love that didn't need applause to feel real. I worked 2 jobs after my husband passed. My boy was 12. I remember his little hands helping me fold laundry late into the night. He'd always say, "Don't worry, Mama. I'll take care of you one day." And I believed him, not just because he was my son, but because that's the kind of boy he was. Kind, attentive, always watching out for me. We were close, closer than close. But life has a strange way of changing people. And sometimes you don't even notice it's happening until it's too late. He met her at a company barbecue. She was bright, beautiful, confident in a way that made rooms turn. She had a laugh that pulled people in, and a way of speaking that made her seem wiser than her years. I'll admit, I liked her at first. Or rather, I wanted to like her for his sake. The first time he brought her home, she complimented my cooking, asked for seconds, said my home was cozy. Though the way she said it, I couldn't help but wonder if that was code for small. I told myself I was being sensitive, paranoid, but that little voice in my head, it never stopped whispering. The shift started slow, like tiny cracks in a porcelain vase. She began correcting him in front of me, little jokes at his expense, frequent. Then she moved to me. It was never direct, never enough to call out explicitly, but the digs were there. One Christmas, she gave me wrinkle cream wrapped in gold ribbon. "It's anti-aging," she said, smiling. I swear by it. Another time, she offered to teach me how to use Google Docs because, in her words, "You probably struggle with that kind of stuff." I wanted to believe it was generational, that she didn't mean harm, that it was me, not her, but each interaction left a mark. Small, invisible bruises no one else could see, except maybe her mother. The first time I met her mother was at their engagement dinner. She arrived in a car that probably cost more than my house. She barely acknowledged me, didn't shake my hand, just nodded as if I were staff. During dinner, she leaned across the table and asked my son, right in front of everyone, "So, are you sure about this? I mean, you're really ready to marry someone with such a humble background?" The room went silent. My son laughed nervously, brushed it off. I swallowed hard, kept my smile fixed. But in that moment, something inside me broke. Not from pain, but from the searing realization that this was no accident. She wasn't just rude. She was intentional. The wedding came fast. Too fast. Her mother took over most of the planning. I was given a seat and a dress code. No voice. No space. I told myself, it's their day, not mine. But that didn't stop the ache. On the day of the ceremony, I arrived early. I watched her mother float through the room like she owned it. I watched my son look at his bride the way he used to look at me when he brought home his spelling tests, eager for approval. And I knew then I was losing him. Marriage changes things. That's natural. But what came next? What followed after the wedding wasn't natural. It was cold, quiet, a gradual exile. I stopped being invited to dinners. Texts went unanswered. Holidays became complicated. When I did visit, she was always watching, not welcoming, monitoring. My son stopped calling me Mama. He started calling me by my name. "Thanks for coming by, Evelyn." Evelyn. I had become a visitor in my own child's life. Still, I stayed polite. I stayed present. I held on to hope. I told myself it was just a phase. But with each visit, something new would happen. Subtle jabs. Passive-aggressive smiles. My favorite mug disappearing. My spot on the living room couch suddenly too cluttered for guests. My son's eyes no longer meeting mine. And then came the health questions. I'd feel dizzy after a meal. Tired in ways I couldn't explain. Confused. I started keeping notes, writing down what I ate when I felt off. And more often than not, it happened when she cooked, when she handed me tea, when she poured my drink. The doctors found nothing. Stress, they said. Maybe age. But my gut knew better, because while I was losing weight, losing sleep, losing time, she was growing bolder. And her mother? She was always there, perched like a queen, always whispering things I couldn't hear, laughing in ways that made the air around her feel colder. The two of them were a team, unbreakable, intimidating, unified in a way that made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Then one day at a family brunch she insisted on hosting. It happened. She handed me a glass with a twist of lemon and a clink of ice. "A little treat from my favorite mother-in-law," she said. Her grin stretched from ear to ear. I looked around the room. My son was distracted, laughing with his stepmother-in-law. No one noticed us, except her. She was watching, waiting, expecting me to drink it down like I always did. But this time I didn't. I waited. I watched. And when her back was turned, I switched the glasses. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just switched them. Her mother didn't notice either. She was too busy bragging about her new stock investments and the renovation on her beach house. She picked up the glass, clinked it against the rim of her mimosa, and drank. And I waited. 35 minutes. That's all it took. 35 minutes to answer a question I had been carrying in my chest for almost 2 years. Was it all in my head? But what I remember most from that day was silence. The kind of silence you carry in your chest. The kind that feels like screaming, but only on the inside. I stood in the second row at the wedding, behind her mother, of course. She insisted on walking her daughter down the aisle. No father in sight, just her, floating in head-to-toe designer, claiming center stage. And when my son turned to watch his bride approach, I saw it in his face, that familiar mix of awe and nervousness. But he didn't look back at me. Not once. During the vows, her mother squeezed my arm and whispered, "You should be grateful. This is the best your son will ever do." I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I just stared ahead and tried to imagine my late husband sitting beside me, squeezing my hand in the quiet way he always did when something felt wrong. But words wouldn't fix it. At the reception, I was seated at table 6. The rest of the family was at table 1. I smiled through it. I clapped for the speeches. I held back tears when my son thanked everyone who raised me and named his high school teacher his football coach. But not me. Not once. I didn't say a word. That was the beginning of my silence, but not the end of it. Marriage didn't change her. It amplified her. Within weeks, she started referring to me as his mom instead of my name. In public, she'd say things like, "Oh, Evelyn? Yeah, she means well." To strangers in front of me, I became something to explain away, an obstacle to manage. I remember the first family dinner after they got back from their honeymoon. She served me a plate of food and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Careful, it's spicy. I know you older folks can't handle heat." Everyone laughed, even my son. I laughed too, that soft, brittle kind of laugh people use to survive humiliation. She corrected me constantly. If I told a story, she'd jump in with her version. If I offered advice, she'd respond with a smirk and say, "Well, actually, everything I said was either outdated or cute." I was slowly being painted as a relic in the room, present but irrelevant. And my son, he stopped seeing it. Or maybe he chose not to. I'd call and she'd answer. Always her. She'd say he was busy, tired, resting. One time, I called to wish him a happy birthday, and she told me he was on a call, but she'd passed the message along. I never heard back. One afternoon, I arrived unannounced with a dish he used to love. She opened the door, looked at the container, and said, "Oh, how thoughtful. But we don't really do fried food anymore. You know, gut health and all." Then she smiled and took it from my hands. I never saw it again. It wasn't just her, though. Her mother became a regular fixture. She came for dinner. She came for brunch. She came just because. Every time I visited, she was already there in my seat, telling my stories, giving my son advice, slowly becoming something I used to be. Once, during a small birthday gathering, her mother pulled out a photo album. She showed baby pictures of her daughter, awards, certificates, home videos. She looked at me and said, "You must wish you had documented more. These memories are priceless." I excused myself to the bathroom. I didn't cry. I just stared at my reflection and asked myself the question I had started asking more often. What am I doing here? But then the strange things began. Small at first. A forgetful moment here. A wave of dizziness there. I chalked it up to exhaustion, maybe dehydration. But then it got worse. I'd walk into a room and forget why I came in. My hands would tremble while washing dishes. My vision blurred once while reading a recipe. My body, which had always been strong, steady, reliable, began to feel foreign. I went to the doctor. Blood pressure, cholesterol, vitamin levels, all normal. They suggested stress. Maybe early menopause. Maybe grief. Maybe just age. But I knew my body. I had lived in it long enough to know when something was different. And what made it harder was how she reacted. Not with concern, but with suggestions. Supplements. Teas. Oils. A detox smoothie she insisted I try. One day she handed me a little pill container labeled Daily Balance and said, "This helps with memory and mood. I use it. You should too." And that voice inside me, the one I had spent years ignoring, started speaking louder, warning me something wasn't right. One evening, she made me a specialty blend, said it would soothe the nerves. I took one sip and instantly felt lightheaded. Not dizzy, just hollow, like someone had dimmed the lights inside my head. I excused myself, went home, and threw up everything I had eaten that day. My stomach churned for hours. The next morning, I wrote it all down. Time, date, what I ate, what I drank, who made it, how I felt. I started keeping track. Like evidence. Like I was building a case I couldn't explain. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Who would believe that the same charming daughter-in-law who threw Pinterest-perfect dinners, who volunteered at charity events, who always kissed me on the cheek when she arrived, might also be slowly erasing me from the inside out. But the most painful part was my son. The distance wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He no longer asked about my health. He no longer noticed when I stopped calling. At one point, he even said, maybe you should see someone. You've been acting different lately. Different. That word haunted me. Was he right? I was different, not because I had changed, but because they were changing the world around me. I started questioning everything. My memories, my words, my reactions. Was I being too sensitive? Was I imagining it all? Or worse, was I becoming the woman they whispered about behind closed doors? The forgetful mother, the moody guest, the fading matriarch. Still, I said nothing. I smiled when I was supposed to. I nodded when they offered advice. I played the role, played it well. But every lie has a limit. Every performance has an ending. And though I couldn't prove it yet, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was being pushed out, not with force, but with strategy, with intention, with a plan so perfect. It almost worked. It wasn't one moment. It was many small details, unconnected at first. A misplaced bottle, a forgotten name, a wave of tiredness that washed over me too fast after a meal, a drink in my hand when she had poured. They weren't obvious patterns, at least not at first. But there was something strange in how the offers came, always her voice soft and generous. You must be parched. Try this. I made it myself. A bit of red wine helps with circulation. Evelyn, let me fix you something. You've had a long day. And every time I accepted, I felt it. Not right away. Not in a way I could point to, but a slowness would creep in behind my eyes, behind my limbs, like someone was holding down my body from the inside out. Some days I would lose hours, drifting off in the middle of conversations, or waking up later than I ever used to. I told myself I was tired. That age was catching up. That maybe, just maybe, they were right. But something didn't sit well. And the more I thought about it, the more I saw it. I had never seen her pour a drink for anyone else with the same ritual. Not even for her husband. Not even for her own mother. Only me, and the supplements. I had been taking the same 3 tablets for years. My doctor knew, my pharmacist. I kept them in a little case in my bag, always labeled and sealed. One morning, I opened the container and found the pills slightly different. Same color, same shape, but faint, bitter scent I didn't recognize. I didn't take them that day. The next week, I found that 2 of the pills were crushed, almost powdered, at the bottom of the bottle. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. I just started watching. At family dinners, I pretended to eat but chewed slow. Slow enough to feel if something tasted off. I drank less. I left the wine untouched. I began to sit closer to the kitchen door, closer to the window, closer to the exits. And I started writing. Not journaling. Documenting. A spiral-bound notebook I kept in my drawer at home. Date, time, what I ate, what I drank, where I was, who served me, how I felt 30 minutes after, 1 hour after. That notebook became my second mind. I didn't trust my body anymore, but I trusted my records. I wrote everything down, even when it seemed ridiculous. I tracked when the brain fog came, when the shakes started, when my skin flushed for no reason. I compared it with days I ate alone, cooked for myself. On those days, I was fine, clear-headed, steady, normal. I remember one Sunday she offered me chamomile tea after brunch. I took the cup, didn't sip, just held it, watched the steam rise. I excused myself to the bathroom, poured the tea down the sink, then rinsed the cup and brought it back empty. She smiled and said, "Feeling better already, aren't you?" And in that moment, I knew it wasn't my imagination. It wasn't stress. It wasn't menopause. Something was being done to me. I started noticing other things, too. My medications, kept in a drawer in my guest room, were sometimes in different positions. A foil packet ripped open. I started counting the pills after every visit. I'd marked the back of the labels in tiny pen dots. One day, the number didn't match. 2 tablets were missing. I hadn't taken them. I hadn't touched them, but someone had. Still, I didn't say a word. I couldn't, because what would I say? That I believed my daughter-in-law was drugging me? That her mother was possibly in on it? That my son, my only son, was sleeping beside someone who might be slowly erasing me? I needed more. I needed something they couldn't explain away. So I took pictures. Not of them. Of everything else. The altered pills. The food I didn't eat. The drinks I poured out in the sink. The bottles I suspected had been tampered with. I placed them in sealed bags and labeled them. I didn't even know what I was building, but I was building something. Something I could hold up one day and say, this is real. I even started asking questions, subtle ones, disguised as forgetfulness. I'd say, oh, I don't remember taking that vitamin. Did you give it to me, dear? Her eyes would flicker just for a second. Then she'd laugh and say, yes, don't worry. You always forget. Every time I pretended to forget, she got bolder. Every time I smiled and played confused, she added a little more. Every time I left something untouched and returned it empty, her confidence grew. And that told me something very important. She wasn't just trying to make me sick. She was trying to make me doubt myself, trying to make others doubt me. Slowly, methodically, she was constructing an image of me as fragile, forgetful, fading. There was one night I'll never forget, a family movie night. Her mother had just arrived, uninvited as usual. She sat next to me, glanced at my knitting bag, and said, still keeping busy, I see. That's good. Idle hands are the first sign of the mind slipping. The words were casual. The tone was pleasant. But I heard them for what they were. Another brick in the wall they were building around me. A wall that, once completed, would isolate me completely. I would be the confused mother, the unreliable narrator, the emotional one, the burden. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't confused. And I wasn't going to be erased. So I kept playing my role, kept letting them believe I was slipping. Meanwhile, I was sharpening my awareness like a knife in the dark. I began asking my pharmacist about lab testing for supplements. I quietly contacted an old friend of my husband's who worked in forensics. I asked questions he didn't understand, told him I was writing a book about elder abuse, just to keep things safe. I was preparing for something. I didn't know what, but I knew that sooner or later they'd cross a line, a visible one, a line I could trace back to them in broad daylight. And when that moment came, I'd be ready, because no one, not her mother, not even my own son, would see it coming. When I finally took back control, it wasn't with yelling, not with accusations, but with the quietest weapon of all, proof. The invitation came by text, casual, bright, with too many exclamation points. We're hosting dinner this Saturday. Just close family. Can't wait to see you, Evelyn. I stared at it for a long time. I knew what it meant. These dinners weren't really about family anymore. They were about display, about control, about making sure I stayed in the place they built for me. Silent, agreeable, small. I didn't reply right away. I waited until the next morning, then typed a simple, looking forward to it. No emojis, no warmth, just the kind of answer they were used to by now. Predictable, harmless, but I wasn't coming empty-handed. I brought more than my purse that evening. I brought my records, my suspicions, my stillness, my silence. The house was immaculate. It always was too perfect. Every napkin folded the same way. Every fork aligned like soldiers. Her mother was already there, perched at the kitchen island like it was a throne, swirling a glass of red wine and making notes about the ambience. I greeted them both with the kind of smile I perfected over the last year, warm on the outside, hollow underneath. My son greeted me with a side hug, distracted. She kissed my cheek. Her mother offered a compliment that sounded more like a warning. You look well, Evelyn, much better than last time. Must be all the rest you're getting. I simply nodded and placed the dessert I brought on the counter. Apple crisp, her least favorite. I knew she wouldn't touch it. Dinner began the way all their gatherings did. Forced laughter, stiff small talk. Her mother talked about real estate. She talked about renovations. My son sat quietly, occasionally glancing toward his phone. I took small bites, careful to eat only what I served myself. Then it happened. After the plates had been cleared, she stood and said, "I've made something special for tonight, just for you, Evelyn." She said it like it was a gift, like I should be honored. She turned toward the bar cart and began preparing drinks with a sort of practiced elegance. Ice clinking, citrus slices, stirring with care. My eyes followed every movement. When she returned, she handed me a tall glass, chilled, clear, a pale pink tint with something floating, rosemary maybe, or mint. She placed it directly in front of me and smiled. "This one's special for you. My own recipe. You're going to love it." I met her eyes, and I smiled, a different kind of smile, one I hadn't used in a very long time. Not warm, not grateful, just still. "Thank you, dear," I said, lifting the glass but not drinking. I set it back down. I glanced at my son. He didn't look up. I waited for a moment of distraction, a pause in their orchestrated rhythm. And when it came, when her mother stood to adjust the thermostat and she turned to follow, I acted. Calm, quiet. I reached forward, took her mother's identical glass, and swapped them. My glass for hers. Seamless, effortless. No one noticed. No one ever did. The glasses sat there like nothing had changed, but everything had. I returned to my seat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. No fear, just quiet clarity. I watched her mother sip the way she always did, gracefully, greedily. I watched my daughter-in-law glance at me, then glance at the glass. I smiled again. This time, I saw the flicker of confusion behind her eyes. Small, subtle, but it was there. And inside my mind, I spoke the words I couldn't say aloud. Asterisk if I'm wrong. Nothing happens. If I'm right, we'll all see. Asterisk 35 minutes. I knew the pattern by now. I watched the clock without watching it. I engaged in light conversation. I asked her mother about her new marble countertop. I complimented the lighting. I played my role. But beneath it all, I was listening for the shift. The first sign came as a pause in her mother's sentence. She was mid-sentence describing her wine cellar remodel when she suddenly blinked twice and touched her forehead. She tried to continue, but her voice slurred just enough that my son looked up. Then she cleared her throat, laughed, waved it off. "Must be the wine," she said, though she'd only had half a glass. Her daughter leaned forward slightly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Another 5 minutes passed. Her mother's face flushed a deep red. She reached for her water. Her hand trembled. My son stood. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly, too quickly, then said something about the room spinning. Her words didn't line up. They tumbled over each other like marbles down a stair. Then came the final moment, the one I'd been waiting for. Her mother's hand gripped the table hard, her knuckles white. She looked at me, not at her daughter, not at her son-in-law, at me, and I looked back. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just held her gaze while the panic slowly bloomed in her eyes. She stood suddenly, or tried to. The chair scraped back. She stumbled sideways and knocked over her glass. My son rushed to her. My daughter-in-law froze. There were voices, frantic ones. My son calling her name, his wife dialing her phone. The smell of something bitter rising from the spilled drink. But I didn't move. I sat there, calm, watching, the way I had watched for months, the way I had learned to wait. The paramedics came. The questions started, and all I said was, "I don't know what happened. She seemed fine a moment ago." No one asked about the drink. Not yet, but I knew it wouldn't take long. As they carried her mother out on a stretcher, I caught my daughter-in-law's eye. For the first time, she looked at me like she didn't know who I was, like she'd been looking at a ghost this whole time. And now, only now, she was seeing the woman behind the silence. I held up my glass, the one meant for me, still full, still untouched, and I whispered to myself, "What a shame. I guess I just wasn't thirsty tonight." The room was loud, but I only heard one thing, the sound of her breathing changing. That slight, stuttering inhale that comes before the body knows something is wrong, but hasn't figured out what yet. She clutched her stomach first, one hand, then both, as if something inside was curling tight. Her shoulders hunched inward. She blinked rapidly. Her wine glass slipped from her grip and hit the table, wobbling. She mumbled something no one could understand. Her daughter was the first to react, half standing, half restrained. "Mom," she said, "not loud, just sharp. Control concern, not panic." "Not yet." I stayed seated, folded hands in my lap, watching because I had seen this play before. I just hadn't been the audience. Her mother coughed once, twice, loud, dry, hoarse. Then she gripped the edge of the table and pulled herself up slowly, only to wobble and drop back into the chair. Her face began to drain of color. Her lips turned a shade too pale for comfort. My son rushed to her side, placing a hand on her back. "Are you okay?" he asked. She didn't answer, and then she said it, just one word, slurred, thick, wet, "Burning." That's when the panic started. My daughter-in-law was no longer composed. She was on her feet, circling the table, asking questions loudly, too loudly. What did she eat? What did she drink? Someone called 911. Her voice cracked on the last word. Her hands trembled. Her mother tried to speak, but only let out a low groan. The room was no longer in control. My son fumbled for his phone. She had hers out already. I simply reached for a napkin, gently patted my lips, and stood. They didn't notice me at first. Not until I walked over and picked up a glass, the one she had given me, the one I had switched. I held it gently, like it was something sacred. My son looked at me. "Mom, what are you doing?" I met his eyes and said plainly, "This is the drink she gave me." His mouth opened slightly, confused. My daughter-in-law turned quickly. Her eyes locked onto the glass in my hand. That's when her panic sharpened, shifted, more from worry to something else, something primal, desperate. "Wait, no, that's not—" She started, but stopped herself. I tilted the glass slightly, watching the light catch the surface of the liquid. "I didn't touch it," I said quietly. "Not one sip." The paramedics arrived within minutes. Her mother was barely responsive now. They laid her flat, inserted in 4, asked questions. What did she eat? What medications does she take? Did anyone see her ingest anything unusual? I answered with precision. Every item served. Who made what? The timing. The switch? I never raised my voice, never looked emotional. Just facts. She, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. She kept shifting, interrupting, trying to control the narrative. Maybe she had low blood sugar, she offered. Or maybe the wine didn't mix with her medications. She's been tired lately. Honestly, it's probably just stress. The EMT paused. Did she drink anything before symptoms started? She hesitated, glanced at me, then at the glass. Her throat popped. I made a cocktail, just herbs and a little gin. Nothing weird. The EMT took the glass from my hand. He sniffed it, looked at it closely, bagged it immediately. I saw the moment her confidence cracked, the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her lips pressed into a thin, pale line. Her eyes started calculating. Within the hour, the police arrived. A young officer, calm, professional. He asked for statements. I was ready. I handed him my notebook, the one I had kept hidden for months. He raised an eyebrow as I explained what it was. He took it without argument. Read a few pages on the spot. His expression didn't change, but his tone did. They took the drink, the glass, my vitamin bottle, the supplements. My daughter-in-law protested at first. You don't think we... Come on, this is insane. It's just protocol, ma'am, the officer said. We have to rule everything out. The room was cold. Her mother was already in the ambulance. My son stood in the hallway, silent, pale. He looked between me and his wife like he was seeing two people he didn't recognize. And maybe he wasn't. Then she said it, her voice rising, eyes wide with disbelief. She switched the drinks. She must have done it. She must have. Why else would she even mention it? There it was, the twist, the story she'd been dying to tell. That I was the unstable one, the one making things up, the unreliable narrator. But it came too fast, too rehearsed, too loud. The officer didn't blink, just wrote it down. So, you're saying she tampered with your mother's drink? Yes, she said, then faltered. No, I mean she must have. I gave her the other glass. I turned toward them, voice steady. You handed me the drink. You said it was special. I didn't drink it. I switched it with your mother's. She drank it. The silence that followed was thick. Why would I do that? She asked. I held her gaze. That's what they're going to find out. That night ended with her pacing by the kitchen window. My son said little. The police took what they needed, and I went home quietly, slowly, with the same hands I used to rock my baby boy asleep, now holding the proof he had once promised to protect. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because I was certain that something dark had been growing around me, and I had finally reached the roots. Let them dig. Let the lab tests come back. Let the lies unwind themselves. I was ready for the truth to arrive, even if it tore my family apart, because the worst had already been done, and I had survived it silently. Now, the silence was theirs to hold. The truth doesn't always come crashing down in a moment of chaos. Sometimes it arrives slowly, quiet as a letter sliding under your door. Other times, it stands in the corner of the room, waiting for someone to look in the eye and say, "Yes, I see you now." 2 days after the incident, the detective called me back. His voice was steady, measured. "We'd like to speak with you again, Mrs. Hamilton. At your convenience." I told him I'd come in the following morning. But I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of what they'd found, but because I already knew. I brought the journals. Every page. Spiral-bound. Dated. Documented. I handed them over without hesitation. I let them scan through my notes, my observations, my list of symptoms, my calendar reactions. I explained the food, the drinks, the pills, the switch, and then I sat in silence as they asked me questions I had prepared myself to answer for months. Why didn't you say anything earlier? Because no one would have believed me. How long have you suspected she was drugging you? Long enough to be sure. And the drink? Why did you switch it? Because I needed to know if it was real, or if I was losing myself like they wanted me to believe. They listened, took notes, asked for permission to test the remaining pills in the bottle I had brought. I gave it happily. The toxicology results came back in less than a week. The drink, the one intended for me, contained a benzodiazepine derivative, a sedative, one often prescribed for anxiety or insomnia. In high doses, it can cause confusion, dizziness, memory loss, and if mixed with alcohol, worse. They found trace amounts of the same compound in the supplements I'd saved, the vitamin bottle she once handed me, smiling. The officer didn't say much when he called to inform me. "You were right to be suspicious, Mrs. Hamilton. This is being taken seriously." What happened next didn't happen in front of me. I wasn't there when they questioned her. I wasn't there when she folded, when the polished daughter-in-law who curated the perfect image finally cracked under the weight of her own lies. But I read the report. She confessed. Not all at once, but in pieces. She said she just wanted me to rest more, that I was always on edge, that she thought a little calm would do me good. When asked why she never disclosed the pills, why she put them in my drink without consent, why she had offered to handle my prescriptions and mail and my medical renewals, her answers began to unravel. She and her mother had been planning something for over a year. I didn't know the full extent until investigators walked me through it. They had started documenting my behavior, recording moments where I forgot words, where I repeated myself, where I seemed confused. Those were the days I was drugged. They had carefully collected these instances, preparing a case to petition for guardianship, not for my benefit, but for control. Control of what? Of my husband's estate, the retirement properties, the vintage cars he left in my name, the antique collection, the trust funds we had built over decades together. I hadn't touched much of it after he passed, but they had. There were emails, messages, records of meetings with lawyers. Her mother had suggested I might need assisted living soon, that I'd shown signs of cognitive decline. But perhaps it was time for a family member to help manage my assets. It wasn't about helping me. It was about removing me. Legally. Permanently. Quietly. They didn't want me gone. Not exactly. They wanted me silenced. Tucked away somewhere with soft walls and a nurse. Somewhere they could visit once a month and bring flowers, pretending to be the loving caretakers while draining everything my husband and I built with our bare hands. My son, he claimed he didn't know. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he believed her when she said I was slipping. Maybe it was easier to believe I was fading than to admit the woman he married was orchestrating my disappearance in plain sight. When they confronted him with the evidence, the pills, the journals, the confession, he didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. The detective told me he cried. Not for her, but for what he let happen. And her mother? She recovered after a short hospital stay. When they informed her what was found in the drink, she denied everything, claimed I poisoned her, tried to flip the story. But the lab results didn't lie. She hadn't been poisoned by a stranger. She had swallowed the very plan she helped design. Charges were filed. They're still in the system now, under review, under appeal. Legal wheels turn slowly, but I don't need the outcome to validate what I know in my bones. They tried to erase me. Gently, elegantly, with small doses, with carefully crafted conversations, with smiles that masked their hunger. But they forgot something about me. I've lived through war, through childbirth, through grief, through building a home from nothing but raw hands and strong will. I've buried friends, raised a son, paid off a mortgage, and still stood tall when my husband died in his sleep next to me. You don't quietly erase a woman like that. You don't underestimate her memory, her patience, her love for the truth. You don't write her off as fragile and expect her to fold. They had a plan and I had time. They had secrets, and I had a notebook. They had control until the moment I chose to take it back. And when I did, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a fit. I just lifted the glass that was meant to erase me and let someone else drink the lie they poured. That was my justice, and the beginning of their undoing. I wasn't ready for that twist either. If your heart just dropped, go ahead and hit that like button. It tells me I'm not the only one who felt it. He came to my house 2 days after the report broke. No warning, no text. Just showed up on my porch, holding his keys in one hand and a folded paper in the other. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a boy who had outgrown his armor. I opened the door, but didn't say a word. I didn't need to. He stepped inside, sat where his father used to sit, rubbed his palms against his jeans like he was trying to warm up something frozen inside of him. Then he spoke. She didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. You have to believe that. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I couldn't recognize the child I raised in the man sitting before me. He went on, said it was a misunderstanding, that she thought I was struggling, that maybe she got overwhelmed, that she panicked, that it was never about the money, never about the estate, never about removing me. And I listened. I listened to every single word because I needed to know if any of them sounded like truth or they were just echoes of the same lies she had been feeding him for years. When he finished, he looked at me like he expected forgiveness or maybe permission or a way out. And all I said was, "She drugged me, Matthew." His face fell, like he thought I wouldn't say it out loud, like the reality of it still hadn't reached a part of him that needed to face it. "She didn't mean to," he repeated. And then I stood up, walked slowly to the fireplace where his baby photo still sat on the mantel, his little feet dangling over the edge of a tiny red wagon, his hand clutching my thumb like it was the whole world. I picked up that frame and turned it around, face down. He watched me do it. His lips parted, but no words came. I told him I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just tired. Tired of begging to be believed. Tired of sitting at dinner tables where poison wore perfume. Tired of smiling at people who would rather see me buried than bold. I said, sometimes love blinds us, and sometimes love forgets us. He didn't respond. He just stared at the floor like he might find forgiveness written in the grain of the wood. But it wasn't there. When he finally stood to leave, He hesitated at the door. "Will you come to the hearing?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I've already lived it." He left without hugging me, without looking back. And I stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the street that once brought him home for Christmas. The street I used to shovel so he could ride his bike. The one he used to run down barefoot when he was late for dinner. The one I never thought would carry him away from me like this. That night, I packed 2 bags. Essentials only. Few clothes. My journals. The necklace my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. And a house key I no longer had a reason to keep. By morning, I was gone. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just drove. Past the city, past the courthouse, past a memory of my son's face at the door. I found a small town by the coast. Quiet, sunlit, forgetful. I rented a modest cottage with chipped paint and ivy on the porch. The kind of place where neighbors wave and keep walking, where the past doesn't follow you inside. I planted herbs in the backyard. Basil, rosemary. Every time I watered them, I thought about the drink she made me. And every time I saw them grow, I remembered that I survived it. I found peace in the simplest things. Warm bread, radio, the sound of rain against the tin roof. I found strength in silence, real silence. Not the kind I used to bite down on, but the kind that held me like a mother. A silence that didn't ask for performance or explanations or apologies. I didn't block my son's number, but I didn't answer his messages either. He texted once every few weeks. Mostly short things. Thinking of you. Hope you're okay. I'm sorry. But not once did he say he believed me. Not once did he say he left her. So I stayed gone. Because forgiveness isn't always a door you open. Sometimes it's a door you close gently and walk away from, with the keys still in your pocket. And in that little cottage by the sea, with salt in the air and a new name on the mailbox, I rebuilt a life no one could poison. Not her, not her mother, not even the son I once thought would protect me. Sometimes, to save yourself, you don't need to fight. You just need to walk away before they convince you you're not worth saving. And that's exactly what I did. They say revenge is loud, explosive, public, but that's only because they've never seen what silence can do, what patience can carve, what a quiet woman with time and truth can build beneath the surface, brick by brick, until the day she no longer needs to say a word to be heard. I didn't speak to my son for nearly a year after I left. He didn't come looking for me, and I didn't expect him to. But during that year, I made decisions, intentional ones, with the same calm I used to cut onions in the morning or sort laundry on Sundays. Quiet, steady motions, shaping the future without ever raising my voice. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. His name is Arthur. He's been with our family since my husband and I bought our first home. He knew us when we had nothing, when we fought over who would wash dishes, and how we'd afford braces for Matthew. He was the one who read my husband's will when he passed. And now, I asked him to help me rewrite mine. We sat in his small office, surrounded by aging law books and the smell of old coffee. I told him everything. I showed him my journals, my statements, the final police reports. He didn't flinch, just nodded slowly, then picked up his pen. I cut them out, both of them, my son, my daughter-in-law. Every clause, every cent, their names removed with ink, so sharp it felt like a scalpel. It didn't feel vindictive. It felt clean, necessary, like removing rot before it spreads. But I didn't stop there. I asked Arthur to divide a portion of the estate, specifically the part my husband and I had once set aside for family legacy, and donate it, not just anywhere, to the causes my husband believed in. A veteran shelter he used to volunteer at, a scholarship for young mechanics, a program that restored old military jeeps and gifted them to museums. My husband had hands that knew how to fix anything with wheels and an engine. He believed in hard work, in second chances, in helping quietly without expecting applause. So that's where I sent the money, to places that still held his fingerprints in spirit. The rest, the remainder of everything we had built, I left it to my granddaughter. She's only 6 now. doesn't know much about lawyers or estate plans or betrayal. But she once climbed onto my lap and whispered, "Grandma, your hugs make my heart stop hurting." That's all I needed to know. She was still untouched, still good. But I didn't leave it to her blindly. I created a trust, one that would be released to her on her 25th birthday. If, and only if, her father and mother had no legal or financial control over her life. A clause that couldn't be challenged. My lawyer made sure of it. Until then, Arthur would manage the funds, invest them, protect them, make sure that what her parents tried to steal through manipulation and sedatives never reached their hands. Not a cent. And then I wrote the letter, longhand, no computers, just ink and paper and time. I started with the truth, every line of it. I wrote about the drinks, the dinners, the silent months of confusion. The moment I realized I was being erased with kindness. I wrote about the switch, the 35-minute wait, her mother collapsing across the table while I sat with my hands folded, finally watching the lie crumble under its own weight. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't make it bitter. I just told as it happened, with the kind of clarity only a survivor earns. I wrote that I forgave them, not for their sake, but for mine, because holding on to what they did would have rooted me in a place I had fought so hard to leave. I forgave them, and then I let them go. I wrote to my granddaughter, too. I told her that being a woman in this world sometimes means learning when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to walk away without explaining a thing. I told her that family is supposed to protect you, but when they don't, you have every right to protect yourself. I sealed the letter in an envelope, gave it to Arthur with strict instructions to be open the day I pass. Not before, not after. That was my justice. Not headlines, not prison sentences, just paper and truth and time. No one would know until it was too late for them to undo it. And when the day comes years from now and they open the envelope, expecting something soft, something sentimental, they'll find instead the entire story they buried staring back at them in my handwriting. That's the thing about silent revenge. It doesn't scream. It waits. It outlives the lies. It survives the spin. It sits quietly in a drawer, knowing that one day the truth will arrive wearing my voice, and there won't be a single thing they can do to stop it. And in that moment, whether I'm still breathing or just a photograph on a mantle, they'll know I never needed a shout to win. Time passes, whether you chase it or not, whether you're ready or not, whether you're broken, healing, or standing perfectly still. 3 years slip by quietly, just seasons changing outside my cottage window. Birds coming and going, waves crashing like clockwork. And slowly, gently, the ache I carried started to dissolve. Not because it stopped hurting, but because I finally stopped needing it to make sense. I found rhythm in the ordinary. I started volunteering at a small community center, not far from my new home. Nothing fancy, just a 2-room building tucked between a pharmacy and a diner. But it had warmth, real warmth. We held free art classes for kids on weekends, soup nights on Thursdays, book swaps, grocery drives. I'd sit and listen to people's stories, help fill out forms for food stamps or housing support, teach the elderly how to use email. No one knew me as her mother-in-law or his mother or the woman who almost lost everything over a cocktail. I was just Miss, and they didn't know my past, and I didn't volunteer it. I wasn't hiding. I had simply outgrown the need to be seen through the lens of pain. I had other things to do. But life has a way of circling back. Truth has its own timeline. And one day it came knocking. It started as a whisper. A neighbor mentioned that a woman matching my daughter-in-law's mother's description had been admitted to a private care facility a few towns over. Failing kidneys, chronic confusion. Some said early dementia. Some said stress-related collapse. No visitors. Just silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance in satisfaction. I just poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window for a long time, because I remembered something my husband once told me. Back when life still smelled like paint thinner and fresh wood, the ground always levels itself. Sooner or later, it all evens out. A few weeks later, the second wave came. My son, he showed up at the community center just after closing. I almost didn't recognize him. He had more gray in his beard, less weight in his voice. His hands trembled slightly when he tucked them into his pockets. "Mom," he said, just that, like it was the first word in a language he hadn't spoken in years. I didn't rush to hug him. I didn't collapse into tears. I just nodded once, quietly, and gestured to a bench outside. We sat in silence for a while, long enough for the sun to dip behind the roof and the crickets to start singing. Then he said, "She's gone. She left. Took the car. The savings. Everything. It was all a lie, Mom. Not just what she did to you. Everything. I found bank transfers, fake business filings, credit cards in my name. I don't even know who she is anymore." I waited. I let him speak, because I wasn't going to carry his guilt for him. Not this time. "I'm so sorry," he said. And this time his voice cracked. Not the surface-level kind. The kind that comes from the bones, from shame finally finding its way out. I looked at him long and hard, and I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to ask where he was when I needed someone to believe me. I wanted to ask if he ever read the police report, or if he just skimmed it between bites of dinner. I wanted to ask if he knew how many nights I sat by the window, wondering where my son had gone. But instead, I asked, why now? He looked down at his hands, then said something I'll never forget, because the silence finally got louder than the lie. He asked about the will, said he wanted to fix things, said he didn't care about the money anymore. He just wanted us to be okay. And I told him the truth, not out of spite, but because he deserved to live in the reality he helped create. The will was changed, Matthew. Years ago. You're not in it. Neither is she. He blinked once, twice, but he didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, like a man walking through fog, and finally seeing the outline of a cliff he once refused to believe was there. I told him about the charities, about the scholarship, about the community center. And then I told him about his daughter, that her inheritance was locked away safely, that she would never be under their control, that I left her a letter she'd read someday, when she was old enough to understand the way to survival. He asked if he could read it. I said no, because that letter wasn't for him. He had already read a different version of the story, one where loyalty was blind and truth was inconvenient. He didn't get to rewrite it now. He just had to live with it. He stood to leave, then hesitated. "Do you think she'll forgive me someday?" I didn't answer that question, because it wasn't mine to answer. Forgiveness is never something you can schedule or demand. It arrives when it wants to, or not at all. As he walked away, I looked up at the sky. Soft pink clouds stretching across the horizon, a breeze moving through the trees like a hymn. And I felt it, that stillness, that peace that only comes after fire, after loss, after being burned down to nothing and rebuilding something quiet, strong, and entirely your own. 3 years ago, I was almost erased by the people I love most. But today, I run a center where strangers feel safe enough to cry in front of me, where children laugh with paint on their fingers, where no one has to earn the right to be believed. I lost a son, but I found myself. I buried the past, and in its place, I planted something that won't rot. And that is enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream in courtrooms or beg to be heard over dinner tables that had long forgotten what it meant to be sacred. I didn't break windows or throw plates. I didn't storm out of rooms or come back just to be right. I just stepped back. I let the silence speak. I let the truth settle like dust on every surface they try to polish with lies. I watched time stretch its arms and do what it always does, reveal, because the thing about time is it doesn't hide things forever. It doesn't protect a seat, no matter how cleverly dressed. And it doesn't reward manipulation. Time may be slow, but it is faithful. And when you trust it, when you stop chasing justice and start embodying it, something changes. You rise and they shrink. I rebuilt quietly, thoughtfully. I cut ties not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I changed my will not in vengeance, but in clarity. I poured what was once pain into places where it could bloom. I left seeds behind, not so they'd remember me, but so they'd never forget themselves. In the end, they lost more than money. They lost access. They lost legacy. They lost the right to stand in the shade of the very tree they tried to chop down. And me? I gained everything I almost lost. Myself, my voice, my peace. I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't play their game. I just stood still. Thanks for watching. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between fighting for a truth no one believed or finding your own quiet peace? What would you have done in my situation? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.